You know, people ask me all the time, why do you do this? Why do you not retire and read books and write fancy academic papers? And I say, yes, that is also important. But what is more important is that I was given an opportunity to read books in the first place, to engage with ideas because of the sacrifices of ordinary people. And so part of scholarship must be given back to the people in the form of public engagement. I see myself as a public scholar, what we call an activist scholar or a scholar activist, who's always trying to use the knowledge that is gained from reading books, from observing people in their communities, in their society, and giving them back, in the words of a UC Kwayana, giving them back to the people as a political nourishment and by extension, cultural nourishment. That's what I'm about. It's about being that public scholar whose work is not just confined to the classroom, but that classroom is extended to the public space. I'm David Hart.
One race from the same place that make the same trip on the same ship. So we must push one common intention. It's for a better life in the region, for we women and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean and the Caribbean and the Caribbean.
If you hear that, black is beautiful. Santa Claus. Black is beautiful. It's a texture. Lift your head like me. You got to wear it for with dignity. How it burns out. Black is beautiful. I said, sing it along. Black is beautiful. Say, I'm black and brown. It's high time that we get rid of that old slave mentality.
And when we speak of civil liberties and civil rights, people are beginning to understand that the most fundamental of these is the right to work in our society. And what is occurring in Guyana is that the government is making political capital out of the indefensible position of one who is either unemployed or is very close to the line of being unemployed.
I want to say to you all, in no uncertain terms, that this government is disrespectful to black people. And if people disrespect you, you have a right to disrespect them.
I am saying now that we have started, now that we have come together, do not sleep. Don't let us go back quietly into the night. Protest must be the order of the day.
Rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here comes the West Indies. And when you're facing the generals, nearly every ball is a funeral. And when we battle, brother, go and put your men on the boundary line. And if you give we a liquor, that is merely a hiccup. Look, you win the little battle, you lose the war. It's the same result every time. Everybody sing, here come the West Indies. Here come the West Indies. Them rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here come the West Indies. I tell you now, here come the West Indies. Here come the West Indies. Them bad boys gonna gonna bring you to your knees. Here comes the West Indies. Special request to the Trinity posse. And what about the Guyana posse? And what about the Jamaica posse?
Mr. Watts, he has armed himself shots. Shots, watch it, tear gas. Light rounds, also I can see that.
And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. It's a brand new week. It's Monday evening, wherever you're joining us from. We would like to welcome you. Good evening to the people of Linden. Good evening to all of you. Those of you who are joining us from Guyana, those of you who are joining us from outside of Guyana, welcome to Politics 101 on a Monday night. Please share the link. Please do share the link and let everyone know. Tonight we are going to be discussing some very important matters, and we would like as many people as possible to partake in the discussion. So please share the link as we prepare for tonight's edition of Politics 101. It's called Race, Racism, and Blackness. What do they know of race, racism, and blackness? So please share the link. Please share the link as we prepare for tonight's program of Politics 101.
For Les Brown, my white friend in London. Stay up, Les.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
On the plantation, in days of slavery, white people used to laugh at blacks. Or some black people dressed up like whitey and entertain them, dance on white cracks. Though slavery born and the toil's done, some white people still having fun. For there are black folks who by their works still providing the whites with jokes. White cricketers who play down South Africa, then to the Caribbean after. When we support them and make them our hero, them Englishmen laughing at me for so. When blazing grenadier adore Regan so, and make him a national hero. How could Mr. Regan be hero in Bishop's country? White people laughing at me, you see. And when Eugenia tell me Regan and Thatcher love she, white people laughing at me. Whitey feel all Africans are indisciplined. For daily they're shooting, among themselves they're fighting, knifing and raping their own black skin. Some leave Jamaica for America and join the army. coming. Soon as they land, Yankees laughing while Jamaicans catching the bullets for them in Beirut and Iran. Black people feel that for them to look cute, they must dress up in three-piece suit. Sun hot like fire, yet they dress for winter. Englishmen just love at their attire. When black women color their hair red and green and comb it like an English pumpkin. Jericho and plastic surgery to hide their identity. White people laughing at me. See, black man walking in the city because I play a jamming loudly. White people laughing at me.
This is Caribbean Vibe.
Brainwashed for so they hate Gaddafi and Fidel Castro. They hate socialists but love capitalists. Don't mention communists, that's a curse word you know. But while blacks hating, they ain't seeing is poor and poorer. They becoming Europe striving and capitalists giggling for all their products, black man using. On TV we see a heap of white preachers and blacks sending them their dollars. Preachers wearing mink and driving Cadillacs and laughing at blacks giving Jesus greenbacks. When Caribbean man go to London and Kent and copy the white man's accent. How can a Barbadian be Yankee more than a Yankee? White people laughing at me. And when I see black coke addicts in the city, stink and shaking in misery, white people laughing at me.
This is Caribbean Vibe.
On the plantation, in days of slavery, white people used to laugh at blacks. Or some black people dressed up like whitey and entertain them with dance and white crafts. Though slavery gone and the toil's done, some white people still having fun. For there are black folks who by their works still providing the whites with jokes. White cricketers who play down South Africa, then to the Caribbean after. When we support them and make them our hero, them Englishmen laughing at me for so. When blazing Grenada adore Reagan so and make him a national hero. How could Mr. Reagan be hero in Bishop's country? White people laughing at me. See? And when Eugenia tell me Reagan and Thatcher love she, white people laughing at me. Whitey feel all Africans are in and join the army. Soon as they land, Yankees laughing while Jamaicans catching the bullets for them in Beirut and Iran. Black people who feel that for them to look cute, they must dress up in three-piece suit. Sun hot like fire, yet they dress for winter. Englishmen just laugh at their attire. When black women color their hair red and green and comb it like an English pumpkin. Jericho and plastic surgery to hide their identity. White people laughing at me. You see, black man walking in the city because I play a jamming loudly. White people laughing at me.
This is Caribbean Vibe.
Brainwashed for so they hate Gaddafi and Fidel Castro. They hate socialists but love capitalists. Don't mention communists, that's a curse word you know. But while blacks hating, they ain't seeing this poor and poorer. They becoming Europe striving and capitalists giggling for all their products, black man using. On TV we see a heap of white preachers and blacks sending them their dollars. Preachers wearing mink and driving Cadillacs and laughing at blacks giving Jesus greenbacks. When Caribbean man go to London and Kent and copy the white man's accent, how can a Barbadian be Yankee more than a Yankee? White people laughing at me. And when I see black coke addicts in the city, stink and shaking in misery, white people laughing at me.
Black is beautiful, Santa Claus. Black is beautiful. It's a texture. Lift your head like me. You got to wear it for with dignity. How it burns out. Black is beautiful. I said, sing it along. Black is beautiful. Say, I'm black and brown. It's my time that we get rid of that old slave mentality.
Welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Those of you who are just joining us, we are warming up. Wherever you're joining us from, those of you who are joining us from New York, welcome to Politics 101. Those of you who are joining us from Europe, further afield, good evening and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. It is, of course, tonight, Monday night. Monday night is the beginning of the week, and we were off on Friday. I had an appointment, and I underestimated how long it would have taken, and so didn't get back on time. So our apologies. But please share the link. We're on tonight. Let everyone know that we are here. We are here tonight, and we're going to be talking tonight. Good evening to all of you. Some of you are here already. Please share the link. Please do share the link because we're going to be talking some serious talk tonight. We'll be ready in a couple of minutes. Please. Share the link. Please do.
Mr. Trinidad, tell me what scene you on. Do you just like political confusion? You criticizing the way you live, yet you can't produce an alternative. You say you against the power structure. You ain't like the opposition either. But take care, you jump out the hot water and end up in the center of the fire. Because you refuse to vote in election. But then you want revolution. You're strongly against communism. You walk out on colonialism. You say William had to go, but who to replace him? You end up. So to make a long story short from in front, Trinidadians they really know what they want. My friend, if you don't want democracy, the opposite is guerrilla activity. If you don't want democratic improvement, you have to want a revolutionist government. And yet when Guy Harewood went in the hills with Jennifer Jones, you let them get killed. All you're doing is grinning and skylarking. You come like the ass in the lion's skin. Because you say Robinson is a traitor. You say what's than that about Granger. You say Kamal seeking his own interest. You call Millet a Marxist Leninist. You are ODAC, neither DLP, and you say DNM is only Rachipi. Well, you tying up yourself. I gonna tell you why. Trinidadians just like plenty mama guy. Afro-Trinidadian talking black power. It's not wrong for a man to love his culture. Yes, you walk around with your Afro flat and you're dragging a maggot and fat. But although they're rapping about Africa, you're eating roti like if you're born in India. So who you go blame when you make your book and end up like a cat on a hot roof? Because you say you're going Afro all the way. You smile when they bring in to debate. William say he wants to retire. You beg him to stay a little longer. You reject Carl's act on public order. Now you want the same Carl for Prime Minister. Like your sense of reasoning goes and comes. It won't surprise me if you call back Albert Guns. You say that you didn't want your dictator, yet you want one fella to reign forever. Abbott Malik, you say he guilty. Karmasadi the same, yet you set him free. Long ago you didn't want Fidel Castro, but now you say the same Castro is a hero. Well, this attitude, like Humpty Dumpty, you might fall off the wall eventually. Because you say Butler was too high-handed, even marriage uneducated. You say that we can't trust Jamada. You find Sukaran to Fonkosa. You say the accent is on the young man, yet you run and call back as sports in an hand, but you won't call back until you fall disaster, like the colonial days of the slave master. Indian Trinidadian, naive as ever. That is why they form the Mahasabha. They're conservative, only talking race. Yet you see too much dogla all around the place. They say they just need pork for them. How come them and black pudding is such good friend? You're making your own self a package show. You might end up just like Rumpelstiltskin. You call back Solomon a bashon. You're spending your money in London. You say the country's A-strength fighter is a regular ganja smoker. You call your picture a seditious traitor. Now that same traitor is a union leader. It won't surprise me if you move Malik from that room and make him minister of home affairs tomorrow. Rasta Trinidadian, walking, talking peace. Yes, he always in trouble with the police. Saying peace and love, right on, brother man. Yet if you watch him hard, you want to break your hand. They say they doesn't need pork for them. How come them and black pudding is such good friends? They're making their own self-a-package show. You might end up just like Rumpelstiltskin. Dear dog, you're a prosecute soldiers. For that, he got one set of horrors. And then when Marie gone down walker, they run and they call the same carer. You say Mahathir too quiet and soft, and Victor Campbell is a big show. You ain't what Eric Kamal call neither part. If it's a badge on you want, we'll call Doctor. My friend, if you don't want democracy, the opposite is guerrilla activity. If you don't want democratic improvement, you have to want a revolutionist government. And yet when Guy Harewood went in the hills with Jennifer Jones, you let them get killed. All you're doing is grinning and skylarking. You come like the ass in the lion's den. Because you call Robinson a traitor. You say, what's that about Rachel? You say, Kamal seeking the own interest. You call me better Marxist, Leninist. You are watching, neither DLP, yet you say PMM is only Rachipi. Well, if you're bringing back dead horses on the line, well, it's all right if you bring back Larry Constantine.
Hey. Oh, yes. Quite a long introduction tonight, but that is why, look, in every culture there is revolutionary music. in every culture, in every music, there is protest music. But there is one music that is always revolutionary, and that is calypso, the only of its kind in the world. Our Caribbean has given the world so many gifts. The calypso is one of the great gifts that we have given to ourselves and given to the world. Always saying something, making sense of our experience. The maestro himself, died very young in the 1970s. Came out one night to have someone who had a flat on the highway, and himself got knocked down by another car and died. He was destined to be a great calypsonian. They were saying if there was anyone who would have come close to Sparrow, it would have been the maestro himself. In some regard, he would have sung about his death. Had some classics, Bionic Man. He's known for this, Mr. Trinidadian, really reflecting the contradictions in Caribbean society. Before that, we heard Chuck Doss himself, them people laughing at we. Another self-criticism of the African. And so tonight we want to talk, as you would see from the title, about some issues. Wherever you are, welcome. Ivor, I know you would have loved those Kaisos there tonight. Ivor joining us from out there in Georgia. Keith Beresford, these are aficionados, as they say. We are all, but some of us have, in a sense, studied the calypso. I myself was led to the study of calypso through Caribbean studies and Black studies, and I've had the good fortune of teaching calypso, teaching reggae music, teaching Caribbean and Black folk music, teaching hip hop as forms of political communication. I'm not a musician, political scientist, but teaching Black music as politics. God has been good. God has been good to me for allowing the opportunity to explore our people's experiences in the deepest sense, and to help to give it to the rest of the world, Thank God for the opportunity to do so. You know, you all remember weeks ago, on a Monday night like tonight, the Spirit moved in me, and I made some very, very strong and pointed remarks about a phenomenon that I had seen and still see that is catching on in our community, that is going to be injurious to the Black community in particular, but to Guyana in general. And I sought to highlight the issue of African Guyanese, and the way in which we move against ourselves and we injure ourselves in the long run. And I was not introducing anything new. The great W.E.B. Du Bois at the turn of the 20th century advanced the thesis that the 20th century would be the century of the color line, as he called it. And he introduced the thesis of double consciousness, in which he argued that African Americans because of the experience of slavery in the New World, have a contradiction always going on, and that they're always working through the contradiction. He said there are two consciousness, what he calls the African consciousness, which we brought with us across the Middle Passage from Africa, and then the American consciousness, which we picked up on the slave plantation and through our experience here in the Americas post-plantation society. And he said these two consciousnesses are always clashing with each other. And he refers to it as the double consciousness. Some people say it is what he called the two-ness. And so the theory of double consciousness is one that is fundamental to the study of Black people, study of African Americans, study of the African diaspora. Anyone who studies, teaches Black study, have to engage W.B. Du Bois' double consciousness, or his two-ness, as he calls it. Long before I was exposed to W.B. Du Bois, I always heard the older people in the village say, black man contrary, black man contrary, black man contrary, black man head no good, black man contrary. The young people today say, black people know where they're on. So that black man contrary, when I got old, I realized that in effect they were giving voice to what Du Bois articulated, in the sense that because of our experience of slavery, our long experience of slavery, we developed some contradictions, because during slavery we were constantly trying to be free, but also trying to survive at the same time. Trying to be free, but trying to survive. Trying to get out of slavery, but trying to survive slavery. And in the process of survival, sometimes we compromise some of the principles of freedom. So we are constantly trying to be free, but we are constantly trying to survive. And it is that contradiction that plays itself out up to today in the African Guyanese community, in the Black communities all over the world. You find our people today faced with the onslaught from the PPP government, and they've been in power now for 1992 to 33 years, 28 of 33 years. And they've hammered African Guyanese. And African Guyanese, of course, want to be free from that. But they also have to survive that. And in the process of trying to survive the PPP, they sometimes compromise the principles of the freedom that they seek. And we get the wires crossed, the contradiction. So you hear African Americans on a Monday would say, I am not African, I'm American. And then on a Tuesday, when a black man is shot down on the streets, that same African American who said yesterday that she was not African, she was American, her son is shot down on the street and she become African. Oh Lord, look what they're doing to black people. So we move always in between the two consciousness. And Du Bois talked about it. Frantz Fanon talked about it in black skin, white masks. And Frantz Fanon was a psychologist, among other things. And he argues that, as black people, we have our black skins. But sometimes we act in ways that are injurious to black people. And it is then we put on that white mask. We still have the black skin, but we put on the white mask. Malcolm X introduced the whole notion of the house slave. Marcus Garvey talked about it. So throughout the annals of the Black experience and Black studies, we have had this exploration of the contradictions that we see often in the Black community. Walter Rodney talked about it. A.U.C. Kwayana has a small booklet that he wrote with his wife, Chaiko Kwayana, that's called The Scars of Bondage. That is, 400 years of enslavement has left the African with certain scars. There are some psychological scars. There are some medical scars. There are some diseases that Black people suffer from because of the diet that we have had over 400 years during slavery, forced diet, forced by enslavement, and then after slavery, the diet was forced by poverty. And the diet leads to certain diseases. We know hypertension and diabetes. It is not that hypertension and diabetes and some of these things are not present in other races. They are. So there's nothing in the Black genes that leads to hypertension or diabetes or cancer thing. But we are disproportionately more vulnerable to those diseases because of a diet that was forced on us over centuries. It is not that we are biologically disposed to diabetes and hypertension. It is not that. It is not that Black people are born to die from diabetes and hypertension. It is the scars of bondage, the scars of slavery. If you lock somebody, the other day, let me give you a personal experience. On Friday there, as I was told you on an appointment, I went to see my eye doctor. And it was a very busy day for the doctor. And they put you in the room and you're waiting for the doctor. And I'm sitting there for 1 hour in this room, closed, nobody checked with me. So after about an hour, I got up and opened the door. And I said, well, you all locked me in this place like I am a slave, a prisoner. Nobody check us, even prisoners, people just check on. The doctor eventually apologized to me, and he said he said as an African American, he's very, very conscious of the fact that, when you put African people in those kinds of circles, it triggers in them a certain kind of reaction. So there are certain things that African Americans, African people, Black people, African Guyanese respond to because of that experience of enslavement. There are certain behavioral patterns. The whole notion of Rastafarianism, which is really a rejection of Europeanism. The matted hair is not something that is biological. It's a cultural response to white imposition of hair. Hair is part of identity. The fact that our women wear their braids and we wear locks and so on. It's not anything biological that leads us there. It's a cultural response to an imposition of European hairstyle. When our young men wear their hats turned to the back, it's not that they were born to wear their hats turned to the back, it's that European sense of order says that the cap must be turned to the front. And there is a cultural response that says, okay, I'm going to turn the cap to the back. And so therefore, over time, as African people are working through the experience of enslavement, which was traumatic, you do not take people, turn them from human beings into chattel, into commodities, strip them of their identity, strip them of their religion, strip them of their names, and you expect them to come out of that after 400 or 500 years, and that they see the world the same way as when they went into that experience. There is going to be a particular response that comes out of it. It was a traumatic experience. And so the whole notion of post-traumatic syndrome arises. Brother Orlando Patterson talks about social death. That if you are socially alive, there are certain things that you experience as a social being. You experience freedom, the right to education, the right to practice your religion, the right to have a family. These are all things that are part of the social norm. And these things were yanked away from the African. And so Orlando Patterson correctly argues that what we experienced was social death. We are into the Easter season. The notion of crucifixion and resurrection, that Christ was crucified. And so African people see enslavement as crucifixion, but they do not see enslavement as fixed. There is the other story to enslavement, is the overcoming of enslavement, the resurrection. That is why Easter has particular significance to African people. Now, I am engaging in this discussion because a few weeks ago, like I said, I introduced the notion of African people who exercise their right in modern democratic society or modern society period to belong to any organization that they feel. They're African organizations, they're Indian organizations, Amerindian organizations, but we live in a plural society, and so people have the right to belong to organizations outside of their ethnic cluster, outside of their ethnic community. Those are rights that are granted by plural societies, by societies that are not sectarian. And people have always exercised those rights. African people have always belonged to organizations that are not necessarily organizations that are grounded in their community. It has always been a part of the African experience. Recently, in introducing Brother UC to Guyana in terms of a short biography, pointed out that long before Brother UC ever belonged to an African organization, he was an associate member of the Indian National Congress, which was an organization of East Indians in the 1940s that advocated for Indian independence, India as in India. And Brother UC joined that organization as a young man. He hadn't yet joined any African organization. He joined an Indian organization. He would later become associated with Black organizations, but he joined an Indian organization. I myself have belonged to Indian organization, Indian-led organization, PPP-led organizations. I belong to the Worker State, which was a PPP organization of mostly East Indians who went around the country in the name of the PPP doing drama. And myself and two other brothers from Buxton went and we joined that organization. The right to belong to an organization is a right that we have in Guyana, and all of us have expressed that right. And so a couple of weeks, what I was trying to talk about was not people's right to belong to organizations or an African right to belong to the PPP or any Indian organization. That's not what I was talking about. That's not what I was criticizing. To criticize people for that is to criticize my own self. What I was talking about is what Du Bois was talking about, what Frantz Fanon was talking about, is Africans who, when they belong to these other organizations, they feel that they have to denigrate, put down African people. So I was talking about a behavioral pattern that people who opt to join other organizations or opt to join organizations that are not of their own race, they feel that they have to justify it by denigrating their own African people. And I have referred to it as slave catching because people who belong to the PPP or any organization, that's their right. But if you are going to then allow the PPP to tell you, here's what you need to do. You need to go into the African community and you need to preach to them that they're lazy. You need to preach to them that their leaders are terrible. You need to preach to them that they're uneducated and that the only way they can become a real free people is to come and join the PPP. That was what I was objecting to. And I played the calypso by Crocro, Mr. Weston Rollins of Trinidad, because he was talking about the same thing. It is what Brother Malcolm calls self-hate as opposed to self-love. You can go and join an Indian organization, you can go and join the PPP and still love yourself. I know of a lot of black people who are in the PPP and who still love themselves as black people. I'm not going to call names. I have black friends in the PPP who love their blackness, never would denigrate black people. But this new phenomenon says that, look, in order for me to justify being in the PPP, because I know that if I join the PPP, there's going to be a response to it. Oh, you know, you're a traitor, you're a sellout. The same thing. Indian people join the PNC, then the Makaran, etc., etc. It goes both ways. But the Africans, some of the Africans today, feel that the way you counter that is to, in a sense, say, look, I joined the PPP because being in African organizations, they stifle me. The African organizations are bad. They don't develop black people. And all the other things that come with that. And I am saying that joining an Indian organization, an Amerindian organization, doesn't mean that you have to denigrate your blackness. It doesn't mean that you have to denigrate the black community. It doesn't mean that you have to distort African history. And it is that I was responding to. But I made an error. And the error I made is that I called two names. I called James Bond and I called Leno Craig. And here's why it's a mistake. Because by calling those two names, I've allowed those two gentlemen to respond as individuals. When I was not talking about them as individuals, I was talking about them as part of a group, part of a tendency. But by calling their names, I have done them a disservice. Because instead of them responding to the phenomenon that I was raising, they are responding to it as me, David Hines, an individual, questioning their actions as individuals, which I wasn't doing. I wasn't questioning their individual right to belong to any organization. And I was criticizing them as part of a larger tendency and a larger collective. But because I named them, I gave them an out, because they no longer have the burden of responding to a phenomenon and a tendency. They're responding to it individually. Mr. Leno Craig asked me on this program, he asked me, do you believe, Dr. Hines, that I am a slave catcher or a lick bottom? He asked me that personally. And I told him no. Because I wasn't speaking to him as an individual. I was speaking to a tendency that he is part of. But by naming those two gentlemen, I have done them a wrong, in the sense that I have not given them the opportunity to grow intellectually in terms of understanding race. They're responding as individuals rather than responding as as part of a tendency. And in that sense, I did them a disservice, and perhaps did Guyanese a disservice, because Guyanese now have to listen to those two chaps talking about themselves rather than talking about a phenomenon which Du Bois raised, Garvey raised, Frantz Fanon raised, Malcolm raised, Quayana raised. All of them talked, Rodney, all of them talked about this whole notion of the African. One of the scars of bondage is that we sometimes engage in self-hate. And sometimes we are not conscious. How do you tell the young lady who presses her hair or color her hair, you're engaging in self-hate? That young lady has to be exposed to literature and consciousness of herself for her to then become concerned. Wait a minute, this pressing hair thing symbolizes a certain kind of anti-blackness. I can't do this anymore. I'm pressing my hair no more. I'm locking up. When people move from that to locks or to braids is when they arrive at the consciousness. So people engage in self-hate, racial self-hate. Some do it consciously, a few. But a lot of people, for them, it's unconscious. And they have to arrive at a consciousness in order to then change behavior. And I think I have done a wrong to Leno Craig and James, because I've not given them the opportunity to grapple with the phenomenon that I was raising, because they quite rightly interpret my comments as a personal attack on them rather than a critique of a particular kind of behavior that has been in the Black community from the time of enslavement. And so I've done them wrong because I've not given them the opportunity to grow. I am not saying to people, don't join the PPP if you're black, nor am I saying to Indians, don't join the PNC if you're Indian. I'm not saying that. How could I be saying that? And I am not speaking to those people as individuals. Those people are part of a tendency. A tendency. Race as a phenomenon is not an individual phenomenon. Race is not an individual construct. Race is a collective construct. As an African individual, you fall in love with somebody who's white. You fall in love with somebody who's Indian. You fall in love with somebody who's white. And you marry them and you have a family. But that does not mean that you do not critique whiteness. Whiteness is the collective construct. It's not an individual construct. As an individual, we do things that individuals do. And sometimes our individual actions run counter to the collective imperatives. Race is not an individual construct. And so when I see my brothers, James and Leno, responding to race as individuals, if it's an individual construct, I feel partly responsible for it because I've misled those two guys. Race is not an individual construct. I just finished listening to James, confronting the notion of post-slavery trauma. But he says, but as an individual, I am not traumatized. James, the theory of post-slavery trauma is a collective theory. It's a theory of blackness, not an individualistic theory. The vast majority of black people, because of structural racism, are economically poor. But some of us, because of opportunities, we are not economically poor. So when one talks about black poverty, you can't respond to it by saying, well, I get a couple dollars in the bank, David Hines, so I'm not poor. They're not talking about you as an individual with your riches in the bank. They're talking about black poverty as a collective structural construct. It doesn't mean that they're not black individuals who are rich. And so as I watch my brother James saying, but I am not, but James, some of us, because of opportunities, we don't feel the trauma the same way as others who have not had opportunities like us. Some of us have become conscious, and so we are able to deal with the trauma better than the vast majority of our people who have not attained the same consciousness. I have done those two brothers a disservice and I apologize to them because they're tying themselves up in knots in responding to a collective phenomenon that I've raised as individuals. And they have Freddie Kissoon sitting there egging them on. I don't know whether he knows better because Freddie, I don't think, has read one page. I want to challenge you that I don't think Freddie has read one page of black theory. Freddie went to school at a time when people were reading, you know, he liked to quote Freud and these European writers, you know, the social contract theories, John Stuart Mills. He went to school at the time. That's what they were teaching. He went to Canada and did his post, and so he learned European theories. Freddie has not read one page. One page. He babbles a lot about Walter Rodney. I challenge him. He has never read one chapter of a book from Walter Rodney. It is not his interest. As opposed to somebody like myself, who has had the good fortune of going to school at a time and in a place, meaning that I've gone to Black universities, both as an undergraduate and for my graduate studies, where you're exposed to Black education. And so become steep in theories of Blackness. That we study it and that I have taught it for 30 odd years. Freddie Kissoon doesn't have that, and he's sitting there egging on these two Black boys. So Vincent Alexander went on the program and talked about a theory that is called post-traumatic syndrome of slavery. And it was the first time those guys were hearing of the theory. The first time they're hearing about this post-traumatic syndrome of slavery. And it's based on a book by a psychologist that's called Dr. Joy Dr. Joy I want to get her name right. The Guy Leary. And it's a book that has been trending for the last decade in Black studies. What she called the post-traumatic slave syndrome. She's a psychologist, and she's arguing from a psychology standpoint that there are certain psychological traits that Africans have shown as part of the slave experience, in the wake of the slave experience. It's a relatively new book, and like I said, it's written from a psychology standpoint. There's not been a lot of books written on that subject from the standpoint of psychology. A lot of the texts have been more social science in terms of sociology, political science, economics, etc. Not very many works have come from a psychology standpoint. Frantz Fanon was a psychiatrist, dealt with some of it in his work. So Vincent was on the program, and Vincent introduced this thesis to explain some of the behavioral patterns that I was talking about. Freddie never heard of the theory. James never heard of it. Leno never heard of it. Not their fault. They don't have to read anything about Black study. They don't have the burden. They don't have the burden of helping our people develop consciousness. A couple of brothers, I think on Friday, sent me a couple of voice notes, imploring on me to spend more time on this program, talking about Black history and Black culture, because it's something that is needed in our community. And I agree with them. I agree with them. Right? People like myself have had the good fortune of studying these things. And so we have a role to play in terms of developing the consciousness among our people. That's not That's not Freddie and James and Leno. Them boys got other things to think about. But when they're faced with these conversations, go and do your homework. Let me congratulate James Bond. James was on the program. I think they're airing the program tonight. And James said, when I heard Vincent, I went and did my research. James admitted that I had never heard of this thing. So nowadays you can go on Google and do your thing. And James went, he realized it was a book written. He said, I get some printout in this file, and so on. I want to congratulate James. Before you speak on anything that you didn't air before, go and check it out. So James went, he checked it out. He read one thing. He couldn't speak on the issue because he didn't read the book. He didn't have time to read the book. So James comment on the thing for 2 or 3 minutes, and then he went on to a personal defense of himself against Vincent. And I have to take responsibility for that personal thing, because what the brothers have done, as I said, they've personalized something that is not meant to be personalized. Neither Leno Craig nor Freddie had the decency to do what James did, which is to go and read up, as we would say, on the thing, to realize that Vincent wasn't talking nonsense. Vincent's comments arose out of an intimate knowledge of a theory that is being advanced in Black studies. And this is the problem with guys and girls who want to talk about race. I hear Jack Dio all the time, and PPP people. You know, every time they talk about the PPP, it's the racism. And I feel so bad for Bharat. Bharat is the race card. They use race card against the PPP, and Indians use race card against the PPP. It's not racism, Bharat. Racism is when people believe in their group being superior to another group. Every time I hear my vice president or the vice president of my country, I say, ouch, because he is an agent of socialization, because he's a leader with a big mic. And he is miseducating an entire nation or half of a nation. Bharat, it is not racism. They're using the race card against the PPP. But again, Bharat never read a paragraph of race. He doesn't know the definition of race. He doesn't have to. And it's one of the dangers of this discussion of race in Guyana, that people are talking about race without even knowing the definition of the concept. And I read the comments of mostly of PPP supporters, mostly East Indians, and I feel so bad. Because they're calling everything racism. You wear a braids is racism. You say African is racism. You wear dashiki is racism. And when that thing gets into people's social and political expression, it stays there for generations. We're fighting with it in the Black community. Thank God, but nobody. So, for the most part, Indian Guyanese have shut us out. And 1-2 generations are going to be lost on what really race is about. That very Indian comes to America and is not seen as Indian. That Indian Guyanese becomes black in America. The very blackness that they call monkey, call hungry belly, all these things. When they come to America, they become that thing. That black, in America, they're black. Because Indian is not a race. Amerindian is not a race. African is not a race. Indian, African, Amerindian, their cultures, their ethnicities. Race is black. It starts at black and white. And then you add the color code. Since Africans were seen as black, Europeans were seen as white, where do I put Asians? So we come up with brown, and then we come up with yellow. And the Native Americans, we call them red. What we call the color code in race studies. But African, Indian, Chinese, they are not races. They are ethnicities, their cultures. Race is black. Even on this program, I hear a lot of people say, don't use black. I am not black. Because even our people are confused. African is our cultural identity. Black is our political identity. What has happened over a period of time is that Europeans have pushed Africans to turn blackness into a culture. As Walter Rodney said, if you use my race to dehumanize me, I have to use my race to humanize myself. So Africans have been forced to use race to humanize ourselves. So race becomes wrapped up in our culture. So we are black Africans, or we're African Americans, and we're black and African, So black and African are used interchangeably by black people. But they're two different concepts. Blackness is a political construct. Our Africanness is our cultural construct. Our Guyanese-ness is a civic construct. Guyana can disappear tomorrow. Venezuela can take 2/3. Suriname can take the next third. Guyana cease to exist. So the notion of Guyanese is done with. But yet we talk about Guyanese culture. No. Guyanese is not a cultural identity. It's a civic identity. Guyana can come off the map. We will still be Africans, and we will still be black. We will still be left with our cultural identity and our political identity. Even if our Guyanese identity is a civic identity goes, our people get confused, and I don't blame people. I'm saying that is the burden of people like myself who have had the good fortune of studying these things to bring that consciousness to our people. But when you have the people like Freddie Kissoon, and now I have put Leno and James in that thing, is that them banner now feel that they have to respond to this thing in a personal way. So, they don't have to go and read about what I am getting at. Like I said, I congratulate James Bond. Because at least James went and he said, I went and do my research. I know what he mean. He went on Google, he get the thing, he know, well, here is a book right here, and so on. And they're misrepresenting Vincent. Because Vincent is talking about some biological traits that you see among Africans as a result of slavery. They turn it around to say that Vincent is saying that black people are biologically disposed. All Vincent was saying is that, look, they get certain illnesses, black people get more than other people. It doesn't mean that they're born to die from hypertension. What it is saying is that as a result of their diet over a long period of time, they are more disposed to developing diabetes. It doesn't mean that biologically It is determined biologically that biologically they were born to die from things. And because these guys have not studied the thing, they don't understand what Vincent is saying. And they're accusing Vincent of saying that black people have some biological traits. Some of the arguments in the professor's book, some of us have taken issue with. That happens in any study. People write books, and those of us who are scholars, we take issue with some of the conclusions. I have issue with some of the conclusions in the book, but I accept the theory as a legitimate theory in black studies. And Vincent was using the theory to explain why blacks opt out of their communities in terms of joining other organizations, and then they become very critical of their own communities in a negative way. He was trying to explain it as part of this theory of post-traumatic syndrome. He wasn't saying that something wrong with them. It is just part of a tendency in the black community that we've had to grapple with, and we will continue to grapple with. We live in a society that is a creolized society. We live in a society with other races, other ethnicities. When Elvis Presley came on stage in the 1940s and 50s and started winding up, white people were turned off. How can this white boy on stage winding up? Winding up is a black thing. In their head, black people winding up is a biological thing. Not that black expression and the way we use our bodies in cultural expression arises out of our socialization. They saw it as, so when a white boy go on stage and start winding up, they didn't want nothing to do with it. But Elvis come from down there in Tennessee. They're own black people. He developed some of that. They eventually become their hero after time. But we believe sometimes what we have done with race is that we have biologized race. The white man can't jump, so only black people can jump and play basketball. We forget that as recent as the 1930s and 40s, black people weren't playing basketball. The basketball champions were Jewish people. The Jews, because the Jews live in the ghetto. And basketball is a cheap game. You put up a 2-net and you play your game. It's a ghetto kind of game. And the Jews were living in the ghetto. And when you ask them, how the Jews playing basketball so good, they used to say, the Jews are the artful dodgers. But then the Jews in the 1950s moved out of the ghetto into the suburbs. And the blacks came from the south and moved into the ghettos, and they start playing. They come and they meet the nets there, and they start playing basketball. But people believe there's something biological in black people that make them play basketball better than white people. Or there's something biological in white people make them swim better than white people. But if you go in white neighborhoods, you see a pool in most of them uptown places. You go in them apartment building, they get any pool there? Maybe nowadays you get one pool. I grew up in Boxing, you are trench. You're going to bathe in trench so you learn to swim. All them trench now dry up. Company dry up. This one dry up. So you can't fault our young people if they know to swim. Right? It's about socialization. But what we've done over time is that we've biologized race. But But no, that is not what Vincent Alexander was saying. But because the guys, they don't understand how there's certain biological traits that you see more among Africans. I mean, environmental racism, all them chemical that they're dumping in poor and black communities. Asthma and all those kinds of things you see more among poor people, among black people, more than you see it among white people. So I just wanted to make these clarifications here tonight, and I think it's important for us as black people as we engage what is happening in Guyana. We saw today the minister, exactly what we're talking about. Minister Hamilton, go to the United Nations. And the people are asking, what has the Guyana state done to deal with black structural racism against black? And he said gold scholarship. I mean, I feel so sorry for the brother. But this is what I am talking about. When you are African, you go and you join the PPP. You then open yourself to being used by the PPP to go on a place like the world stage and make yourself foolish. Goal is not a policy that is directed at black disempowerment. I would have loved if the PPP had said, we're developing this gold scholarship and it's going to be exclusively for African people so that we can close the gap between African miseducation or undereducation and the thing. We want to close the gap in tertiary studies between Africans and other races. So we're coming up with this gold scholarship. That is not what happened, but that is what Mr. Hamilton gone in front of the United Nations and saying, and lying. Even if he went there and said, we've come up with this gold scholarship, but we have some quotas in it. And we are saying, oh, we have a gold scholarship. It is national, but we are saying 50% of it should be set aside for Africans. 25% of it should be set aside for Amerindians. 25% of it should be for Indians. We have decided to do this because we feel that Africans are most underprivileged in the education sector. So we have a national policy, but we are going to set aside. It's called set aside. It's called quotas. We are going to put a quota of 50% or 60% for Africans, and then 20% for Amerindians. And so then you can go to the United Nations and said, what we did is we didn't have a race-based scholarship program. We had a national scholarship program, but we recognize the racial disparities. So we put a majority quota for Africans. Then people would have clapped and say, yes, minister, you have now met the United Nations mandate. But that is not the case, and the man go there just making himself a fool. And it hurt when I see an African has to fetch that basket, water in a basket. And that is what I was talking about weeks ago. He go then talk about housing. Again, if the government has said, look, we are going to give, 10,000 house lots. And we're going to set aside 70% of it or 60% of it for Africans because Africans are behind. Then you can go there and talk about that. But our government doesn't understand race. Our government is not interested in race as empowerment of Africans. Insofar as our government is interested in race, it is to give racial privileges to the group that votes for it. And then say to the other groups that if you want to enjoy those same privileges, you have to join the Indian party. It is that I am opposed to. I'm not opposed to an African getting up and say, look, I like the PPP, I want to go join them. You can't tell a man or woman don't do that. But when the PPP is forcing, you put in literally a political gun to people's head and say, if you want to eat a food in this country, you have to come and join us. That is not democratic freedom. That is not choice. That is akin to enslavement. And it is that I was opposed to. And that these young Africans who are enticed to go to the PPP because they want to eat a food, and the PPP in turn will say, if you want to eat this food, you got to go now and catch. I catch you. Now you got to go and catch your own people and bring them. That is the phenomenon that I am opposed to, and that is what I was saying. But unfortunately, I call two men names, and it become about them rather than about a tendency. I assumed that people knew what I was talking about, so I didn't spend enough time explaining people's right and emphasizing people's right to belong to an organization of their choice. So they make it look as though I'm against people belonging to an organization of their choice. We have a lot of work to do. And I thank the brother from in the bush, as he like to say. He sent me these voice notes, analyzing my programs after they're finished. I want to thank you, brother, for imploring on me to do more education on blackness, on race, explaining to people what it is. And the other brother from the quarantine, who also wrote me on Friday, asking me, please, Dr. Hines, please, as an honor to Brother Kwayana, please do what Brother Kwayana did when he was younger, which is, despite his politics, despite his political activism, he's found time to teach African people about their history, their culture, and about things that are African. And I want to thank you all, brothers, that I do need to spend more time doing that, and I am going to spend more time doing it, all right? Because in the type of society that we have, we need this kind of consciousness. And I want to again apologize to James and Leno for making them believe that I was talking about them as individuals. I was talking about them as part of a tendency. And so I didn't give them the opportunity to criticize the tendency and to defend the tendency rather than to defend themselves. Somebody said that James corrupt Melanie. Whether it's right or wrong, it is that I'm talking about. It is not James going and joining the PPP. That is the issue. Is what he is perceived to be doing having joined the PPP. What he's perceived to be doing in the black community, right or wrong. Now, I don't know whether he corrupt Melanie or not. What I do know is that when the party or the organization gets people from a target group to join that organization, they usually use them to corrupt their own community. And I'm using corrupt here in the broad sense, meaning use them to denigrate their own community. Brother James came on this program and in effect said black people were lazy. He apologized. Again, I congratulate him. He apologized. But he said it. I do not believe that James Bond think that black people are lazy. I do not believe that. But where he has found himself, that argument becomes almost a natural argument to make. Because in a sense, you have to say why I have crossed the floor. You have to justify crossing the floor. And so you have to say, I have crossed the floor because I'm different from the rest of them. I'm different from them. And here is why I'm different from them. They're lazy. I am not lazy. I do not believe that James thinks black people are lazy. He apologized. And I heard that one Freddie Kissoon. Oh, James, I asked Vincent Alexander, what is it that you said wrong about black people? Vincent probably forgot what James had said. Freddie, know that James said on this program that black people are lazy. James apologized for it. He apologized for it, right? And I listened to those chaps. I do not believe that Leno Craig believe that black people are lazy. I don't believe that. I do not believe that if Jack Dio tell Leonard Craig go in the black community and buy some black votes, Leno is going to say, yes, boss, I'll go in and do it. Right? But those brothers, because they now join, 2 black people are going to be shot in Linden, and they are going to talk about it as police violence. They're going to personalize it as police violence. They're going to give what is called the minimalist interpretation. And they're not going to see it is police black violence within the context of Indian political leadership. Now, if David Einstein got out his thoughts and go and join the PPP tomorrow, they will throw me out the next day. They will throw me out the next day. Because I am not going to join the PPP and put down black people. I'm not going to join the PPP and go and catch black people and carry them to the PPP. So I won't take God out of my thoughts to go and do it because I know I won't survive a minute. I don't belong to the PNC. I belong to the WP, the only party I ever belonged to. But I never stopped being African, although I didn't belong to the African party. I was still African. I perhaps am more African than people in the African party. You join the PPP, that's your personal business. But when you become less African, is where the problem is. I know there are people in the PPP who are very African, never lost their Africanness. Never. I don't want to call people names. But Dr. Jeffrey told us about Clinton Collymore when they're trying to block up Mashomani. He told them, leave them black people thing alone. He didn't sit there and say, block up the Mashomani black people like wind up too much. He told them, leave them black people thing alone. That is an African that I respect. Because it's being a member of the PPP did not blur his vision about his own race. I don't know much about Clinton Collymore. I grew up knowing in the PPP. We have a long way to go in Guyana, but we are going to do it. I'll be back tomorrow for another edition of Politics 101. I hope you've been able to impart some knowledge tonight to our people and to others who do not consider themselves to be part of our collective. I love you all, always.